All right, so welcome to a bonus lecture. In this lecture, I will be showcasing the offset function to you. Now, offset is a very polarizing function, which means that certain developers absolutely love it, while the others hate it. The reason the function is so polarizing is because while it can offer a lot of advantages, if not used correctly, it can play havoc with your files. Personally, I have liked it much more often than I have hated it. And I think as long as you're knowledgeable of where to use it and are able to work with the limitations, this is definitely something that should be there in your arsenal if you're working with advanced Excel functions. Now, let us say I want to move from B3 to G6. Now, this means I have to go 3 rows down and then 5 columns to the right. So, if we track this movement, we are actually moving 3 rows down and then 5 columns to the right. Let's see how we do this. So I can say equal to offset. The reference is my starting point, which is B3. The number of rows that I have to go down is 3, and the number of columns that I go towards the right is 5. And as you can see, it took me from 1 to 2. Now imagine you want to go from 2 to 3. For this, you will say equal to offset. The reference is G6, and because we want to go 2 rows up, it will be -2. And the column is the same column, so we keep it as 0. And one final time, if I want to go from 3 to 4, then I say offset. G4 is our starting point. I first want to go 2 rows down and then 5 columns to the left, and it takes me to 4. So I hope that gave you an understanding of what offset does. As the name says, offset allows you to take a reference as a starting point and then move a certain number of cells towards the left, right, top, and down by controlling the rows and columns. Now, this is just an illustrative example. We will make it more practical in the next sheet. So we have 5 years of sales with us: 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. Now, if I wanted you to find out the sales for 2016, that would have been fairly simple. We could have used H lookup, which is just like VLOOKUP. My lookup value is 16. The table array is both these rows. The row index number is 2 because we want a result from the second row. And the type of match is false. As you can see, if I change it to 17, it tells me the sales for 17. If I change it to 18, it tells me the sales for 2018. But that's not really what we want, right? What we want is to find the cumulative sale till the year. That means that if I say 18, I want the sale for all the years till 2018. If I say 16, I just want the sum of these two numbers. To do this, we will write equal to offset. Now my reference could be any cell, but I want to choose something that makes sense to the user. So I'm choosing A5. The reason I'm choosing A5 is because that's where the table is starting. Now from A5, I first have to come to 226 because that's where the first year is. How do I come there? I want to go 1 row down and 1 column to the right. So 1 row and 1 column. So far, what have we done? We have started at A5, we went to A6, and then we went to B6. Now from B6, I have to select all the way up till E6. That means I want to choose a width of 4 cells. So the height will be 0, but the width will be 4. And as you can see, let me just do that once again. Okay, my height will be 1. It will show us 226, 255, 443, and 454. If you notice, if I say 15, it only shows me 15. For example, if I choose 1 as the width, it only shows me 1. If I make it 2 for 2016, then it shows me 226 and 255. How do you get the sum of these numbers? Very simple. You simply come here and then put it inside a sum function. And as you can see, if I want the sum of all the 5 years, we can change the width to 5 and it gives me 1869, which is nothing but the sum of these 5 years. Now the problem is that my formula is not linked to B8. So while the user can choose from the drop down the year that they want, the formula is not really connected to that. So we need to somehow make this 5 dynamic, and we can use a match function, something we have already done earlier. So 2016 will be searched for in the entire top row with an exact match. And what will happen now is that when the user chooses 15, the result will be 226. When the user chooses 16, it will be 226 plus 225, which will be 481. Now, if you look at the formula like this without learning offset, I agree with you that it is very difficult to write and very difficult to comprehend. But I'm sure that when you do it step by step, it will make sense to you. Don't do everything at one go. Get comfortable with using the offset function. So just a quick recap of what we did. A5 was a starting cell, which is here. From here, I went to 226. So I went one row down and then one column to the right. We wanted to select the numbers in a single row. So the height is 1 and the width is calculated dynamically by using a match function. Let's do the same thing in a slightly different way. This time I want to use the same offset function in a table that is like this with 2 columns in it. So we say equal to the sum of offset. Now we know that in fact, let me just align it to the left. So we say sum of offset. We know that our starting cell here is going to be, if I start at H3, I want to go one row down and one column to the right. So I come to 226. Now this time we don't want a width, we want a height, right? So I will use a match function. 2015, the lookup array is these 5 years with an exact match. And the width is going to be 1. And as you can see, when I say 2015, the result is 226, 16 is 481, and 2019 is 1869. Right? So exactly the same formula. The difference is that in the previous one, we had the height as 1 and the width was dynamic. Here the height is dynamic and the width is 1. Let's do one more example. Now this time I want the user to be able to choose the number of years that they want. So as you can see, there are 5 years that we have and we want the user to be able to decide how many years they want the result for. Right? So let me remove this. Okay. Now here we would first assume that the user wants, let us say, 5 years, right? So we put the number 5 here and the formula would be, let's say we want the average of 5 years. So equal to average offset. Now we know, like we done earlier, that I want to go one row down, one column to the right. So we come to 226. The height obviously is 1 and the width is this number, right? And as you can see, if the user decides to choose a different number, so if he says 1, it is 226, 2 is 240, 3 is 308. Now, this is great, but what if we wanted to find the average of the last 3 years? So if I just undo it, look at the problem statement. I want to find the average of the last 3 years. So I'm putting in 3 here. Now this would be a little different. We will say average offset. The starting point is A7. But this is where things get complicated. We don't want to come to 226 now, we want to come to 491. So I go one row down, but then how many columns do I need to go towards the right? So if I count the number of numbers that I have in row number 8, this will obviously give me the number 5. So that becomes the number of columns that I move. What is the height? The height is 1. And then what is the width? The width is -3. Let's just confirm the result once. So if I want to find out the average of the last 3 numbers, you notice it is coming as 462 point. Let me just do it here. So it comes as 462.66. Let us remove the decimal place. And we do the same thing here. And again, if you notice, if I change this -3 to -4, then the average of the last 4 years, so from C8 to F8 will come as 411. So think what we did. We first started at A7. We went one row down, so we went to A8. And then we counted how many numbers we have in row number 8, which is 5. So we went from A8 to B, C, D, E, and F. And from F, we went towards the left because we wanted to choose 4 years. So if we don't want this number of years to be a constant, we can simply say -1 into the number of years here. And now the user can decide. So the user says, show me the last year, which is the latest year. It will be 491. The average of the last 2 years will be 473, and this will be 463. We can even change the statement at the top. So we can say average of last 3 years. But very smartly, we can put this inside a concatenation. So we can say average of last, and this number will come from B3, and years. So when the number changes here, the statement at the top also changes and the result changes as well. So a little more difficult than the previous one, but very handy nevertheless. We will do one final example, and in this one, we want to go overboard and add a lot of different elements here. So we want the user to decide how many months they want. So we have 11 months right now, and we want the user to decide the direction. So first, let's see how we can get the bottom 3 months. For this, we will say equal to average offset. Now I know that my starting point is C4, but from C4 I want to come to C15, which means I want to come down 11 rows. How do we get the number 11? To get the number 11, we can simply count the number of numbers in column C. So we'll say count in column C, that will give us 11. The number of column will be 0 because we're not shifting any column. The height will be -1 into the number that the user has chosen, and the width obviously will be 1. Let's just confirm the result. Let me remove the decimal places. So as you can see, if I find out the average of the last 3 numbers, it comes as 131. If I add another month and I make it 150, the average comes as C14 to C16, which comes as 147, and the same result is coming here as well. So it's a very smart function. This allows us to find out the average of the last 3 values. What is the final step required? We just have to incorporate an if statement that will check whether the user has chosen top or bottom. So we will say that if, let me just put it in the beginning, if the value chosen in H3 is equal to bottom, then obviously the answer is the same that I've just written. Otherwise, it is what? Otherwise, it would be the average offset of C4. But from C4, we want to come to 196. So we go 1 row down, 0 column. And then we want a height of 3. So we'll choose a height of 3 and a width of 1. So very smartly, you notice the user can now decide between top and bottom. He can also choose the number of months that they want to see. Like with all the other examples, the solution has been shared with you. So in case you're having any trouble, I would ask you to download the file, go through the formula, and just step by step break it down and try to see where you're having any trouble. But if you're able to understand this well, you'll be able to create absolutely fantastic dashboards that have all these dynamic elements in them. And for the end user, it would be an absolutely terrific experience that you're creating.